Underlying the beauty and precision of art are the principles of mathematics. From the movement of the painter's brush to the physics governing the stability of structures, both the obvious and elusive aspects of art are guided by mathematical precepts. Even the established boundaries of most visual art on flat surfaces is some form of simplistic rectangle. The visual statements made by math are both profound and ubiquitous. Examples of the impact of math on the artist's psyche are exhibited throughout the great cathedrals and mosques, as well as many paintings and drawings. While the obvious mechanics of math may elude the eye in many paintings and other visual art, the techniques used to create the art rely heavily on mathematics. Some art focuses explicitly on the shape and form, yet implicit and accidental forms and techniques are often even more impressive than the intentional and directed. Math is both one of the main sources of what we find attractive in art and simultaneously the basis of its essence. Relationships of curves and lines guide our eyes through a painting and tell us where forms begin and end, while the edges of a picture usually tell us where to stop our observations. For centuries, the shapes of portable surfaces of paintings and drawings have been rectangular in most cases. Even the shaped canvas technique in modern visual art, although departing from the standard rectangle, has linear properties that seem to highlight the desire to display mathematical relationships. Our minds desire to see symmetry, if not in form, then in value or some other element of the art. This desire for symmetry influences artists to create works of that nature. In some cases, the impact of symmetry on us is even more evident when it takes the theme of intentional asymmetry, an oppositional stance to the desired norm. Mathematical relationships in structure are often multifunctional. The arrangement of brick and stone provides support and purpose for a structure and can also lend itself to the aesthetic properties. The drive to build larger and taller structures has held sway over many architects throughout history. Numerical superiority in height has been the quest of many designers of cathedrals for centuries. As for some, the meaning of height is divine. The higher the building, the closer to heaven it is. Serving as a boast of size for many years, the dome of Hagia Sophia was finally rivaled in its height by the Mosque of Selim II. Of course, the case of increased distance from the ground to the top of a structure is a greater matter than simply stacking bricks. As heights increased, so did the evidence of more advanced engineering. The implicit mathematical properties of art and structures is a necessity for the bearing of the burden of the explicit. With the implied applications of mathematics in structures comes the obligatory brandishing of sculpted, painted, and other ornamental works. Hailing is one of the most magnificent examples of this premise is the Palace of the Lion's Dome. From certain angles, the stucco component of the dome seems chaotic and random, but seen directly from underneath, the passion of the artist breaks through in a well-thought-out and elegant design showcasing order and symmetry. The emotions evoked by this creation lend themselves to showering the viewer with awe and admiration for the complexity and precision seen before her. Were this work 10 times smaller, it is likely the effect on the viewer would be far less potent. The implications of size upon the observer cannot be understated. Structure size plays a very important role regarding the effect of the art on the person seeing it. One of the prominent styles of art, which relies heavily on the obvious displays of math, decorates the halls of mosques, covers the surfaces of tilework, and even shares the space where we walk. Geometric arabesque fills the walls of places like the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, Israel. This site, said to be the burial place of Adam, is littered with examples of this amazingly detailed type of art. The outer tilework covering the second visual and vertical division tells us the love the artist had for the purity of relationships in line and symmetry. The rectangular white blocks demarcate the calligraphy above from the other geometric style below them. As we look even closer to the tiles surrounding the structure, we can see smaller and varying shapes making up the primary rectangular splits in the walls. The myriad of shapes created by the colored tile work make level of detail the defining parameter in what the viewer sees as the primary shape at any given location. One of the more fascinating aspects of math and art is the golden ratio. The ratio has a decimal approximation of 1.618. Quantities A and B fall within this ratio if the quantity of A plus B divided by A is equal to A divided by B. This ratio can be seen throughout structures, paintings, and many other forms of art and across many centuries. This ratio was first noticed and recorded by the Greeks, but is evident even as far back in time as the building of the ancient pyramids. Although not precisely within the golden ratio, the Great Pyramids fall so close to it that the influence is undeniable. Not only does this show that mathematics was a consideration in art, but that its presence and influence were implied long before it was defined. The golden ratio plays a large part in figure and object placement in many paintings throughout time. As one of the defining principles in perceived beauty, classic art reflects this precept with astonishing frequency. Derivatives of this concept include the golden rectangle and the golden triangle. The importance of lines in art are reflected in the golden ratio and carried through to more recent innovations, such as linear perspective. Linear perspective was a pioneering idea that allowed artists to create visual art that was realistic in form and distance. The concept of linear perspective relies on an often invisible point on the horizon of the scene, at which point all lines converge. With this technique, there can be many vanishing points or none at all. Linear perspective allows for the accurate displaying of a scene from a given point of view. Without linear perspective, realistic proportions cannot be easily achieved. Before the 15th century, accurate perspective was being attempted without the precision of linear perspective. An example of failed perspective is seen in the carpet page of St. Matthew, found in the Lindisfarne Gospel. The bench upon which St. Matthew sits writing is shown to be descending into the background of the scene. The artist attempted to convey depth through the implication of perspective, but without precise mathematical process, we can see the relations of lines that make up the structure of the bench are skewed and unrealistic. Empirical studies are not the only means by which mathematics has been advanced in art. M.C. Escher showed this clearly in his depictions of impossible scenes and scenarios. His works show how math can be used to not only depict realistic perspective, but also to show conceptually inaccurate scenes that challenge our ideas of that perspective. In his work titled Relativity, one can see how, although mathematically correct in proportionate perspective, ideas of gravity and other physical considerations have been suspended in favor of experimental perspective. Escher's fascination with mathematics was expressed through his art and can be credited with Escher's drive to reproduce his internal imaginings to a visible medium, allowing others to witness his genius and clear grasp of mathematical relationships. His ideas of perspective and proportions, and the relationship to the impossible universe in which the objectified concepts exist, continue to inspire people the world over. Unlike the great cathedrals littering the globe, Escher's works are not very large, but still draw the admiration and awe of any onlooker as sure as any hall in any cathedral. The thing that draws the onlooker is not always easily defined, as viewers of Escher's works vary in knowledge and background in math. Yet our minds, regardless of our mathematical skill, strive to ascertain the complex unity and contradiction of such works. The desire for understanding and definition of mathematics is rooted in the means by which our minds define our universe, and more importantly, our place in it. Putting aside the need to explain the source or to provide extraterrestrial origin, crop formations are one of the most fascinating forms of art seated directly in mathematics. Whether the origin of this form of art is, in fact, natural phenomenon or alien spacecraft, human beings have perused this art form with the same passion as any other artist has done with other forms of art over the centuries. Crop formations, at least those with which this video is concerned, are made using rope, plywood, or other means of flattening extending crops to form shapes and patterns. Circles are often the primary shapes used to create more complex patterns. Bauer and Chorley are two of the most famous crop formation artists who have taken credit for many of the crop formations in the United Kingdom. There is an unquestionable connection to this form of art and the desire to manipulate the emotions of the viewer, notably and often the public. This manipulation is achieved by creating patterns that are imbued with complexity so amazing and awing that their creation can be explained only by mechanisms beyond our comprehension or technological skill and knowledge. The artists of these formations create multi-ringed patterns, ellipses, and several other fascinating configurations. This form has a sense of impermanence, such as the sand mandalas created by monks, but with one very different aspect. These works are meant to be seen and shared, and so are documented, usually from the air, as this is the intended viewing portal for this type of work. As described so far, art depends on and furthers mathematical concepts, such as relational perspective, structural physics, and many of the obvious and invisible elements of mathematics. Without math, realistic perspective would not be possible, nor would many of the marked buildings throughout the world, such as cathedrals and mosques. The drive to show this perspective and build these structures has also driven humankind to create more and better methods of mathematical processes and ideas of relationships from viewer to scene. Math has dominated the human mind directly and indirectly for thousands of years and has allowed artists over the centuries to create the works we value and admire today. Mathematics governs the implied and the defined concepts in art, including the shapes of painting surfaces, the height and formation of buildings, and even the methods by which artists manipulate their tools and materials. Whether we see or feel artwork, the intrinsic property that connects us to and allows us to analyze art has, at its core, mathematics.